Hey guys, welcome back to Cocal Knives. Welcome back to a new knife review. Today we're going to be taking a look at the ZT0456. So pretty cool, really tanky design by Dmitry Sinkevich. Let's go ahead and take a look at the technical specs. Alright guys, so taking a quick look at the specs here. What you're looking at is a 3 1/4 inch blade, sheep's foot, it's flat ground. Blade steel on this is going to be either CTS 204P or CPM 20CV. To my understanding, the 204P is the older serial numbers with the newer stuff coming in the 20CV. That's pretty common now with the zero tolerance lineup. Titanium frame lock, so titanium handle scales on both sides. You get a weight of 6.56 ounces. Pretty hefty guy here. Pocket clip is left or right hand tip up carry only, and it's a manual flipper on KVT bearings, typical stuff. You get the stainless, the hardened stainless steel insert for the lock bar face, and yeah, I'd say that's about it. So, getting all the technical specs out of the way, we're going to go ahead and take a closer look at the blade. Alright guys, so now we're taking a closer look at the blade here. Like I said, as far as blade steel goes, the 204P and the CTS, or the CPM 20CV, they're both great blade steels. No matter which one you get, you're going to be in pretty good shape here, so don't worry too much about that. If you haven't even got one yet and you're planning on buying it new, chances are you're going to get the 20CV anyways. No big deal. Otherwise, you get the sheep's foot blade here. You get kind of this angled approach down to the tip, which is pretty cool. It fits the rest of the aesthetic of the knife, where you get a lot of lines, you get a lot of angles. The swedge also kind of helps out with that, keeping that aesthetic up. It's pretty cool. It's sheep's foot or Wharncliffe blades are never really, my style, but I can see, that a lot of people would really kind of like the styling here. As far as just raw cutting ability, it is what it is. Wharncliffe style blades are going to have their pros and cons as far as cutting goes. You get just a gradual belly up towards the tip, so it's still going to be a good slicer. That paired up with the high grind here, it's going to be good. Finish is just that typical finish that ZT always does, with the stone wash and the satins. Gives it a little bit better contrast, so just when your eye picks it up, your eye can define the flats from the grinds a little bit easier, which is a nice touch. Blade is not terribly thin. It's definitely a little bit thicker than your average blade, so still slices really good in my experience. You get sharpening choil here too, so you get access to the edge all the way back. One thing that I thought was kind of weird here is for the flipper tab, the top portion right up here doesn't have any jimping on it. Excuse me while I bump my camera. Right down here towards the second half, you do get a little bit. It makes it a little weird getting used to the knife at first, at least in terms of flipping it. So you kind of got to attack it down here and push button it rather than light switching it. It still flips really well, and right now I've really gotten the hang of it, but you just need to learn where to place your finger when you first get it, because it's not just as simple as just putting your finger anywhere on the flipper tab and just doing it how you're probably used to. I mean, it's not like relearning how to flip a knife, but it's just the finger placement's a little off at first. So that's one thing that I kind of noticed right away, is finger placement for the flipper tab was a little different, and I had to be a little bit more conscious of how I was flipping the knife. But that being said, still works really well. So there it is. That's the blade there. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at the handles. All right, guys, let's take a little bit of a closer look at the handles here. Um, the handles is kind of a big part of this knife, and when I mean it's a big part of this knife, I also mean literally it's a big chunk of this knife. So you can see here, where the knife isn't, chamfered off here, the thickest point of the titanium, that's a pretty thick titanium slabs for the handle scales. So you get a little bit thicker blade, thick titanium handle scales. This thing is an absolute tank. I mean, it's a monster. That's one of the things you'll notice right away is the heft, partially due to thick handle scales, man, thick slabs of titanium. I know I'm going off Blade HQ specs when I cite most of the specs on these knives when I do these reviews. So I know Blade HQ has it listed as 6.56 ounces. If I recall correctly, the Zero Tolerance website has it listed at 6.3. Either way, you're in or around that 6.5 ounce mark for something that's a 3.25 inch blade. That's super heavy. So that's one of the things that you'll notice right off the bat, mostly due to these handle scales here. Getting that out of the way, they look really nice. So the machining is cool. You can see there's these lines here. I like the design and the look of it. Like I said, just really freaking heavy. Back spacer, anodized blue, as well as the pocket clip and the show side pivot. Gives the knife a little bit of pop, a little bit of extra flair. Looks pretty cool too. Like I said, I like it. I like the way the knife looks in general. A little inconsistent on the colors on the pivot. I don't know if it's going to pick it up. And I don't know if it's supposed to be like this, but it's a little bit more purple towards the center of the pivot and more of a normal blue anodize that you would see, surrounding. I have no idea if it's going to pick up well on the camera there, but just one thing that I noticed. Other than that, like I said, you get the hardened stainless steel lock bar insert, doubles as a over travel stop. So, like I always say, just increases longevity a little bit. It's always a good thing. Pocket clip is the very standard ZT Kershaw pocket clip here. Would have been nice to have a deep carry, especially considering how heavy this is, or maybe it's a little bit better that it balances the knife a little bit further out of pocket for the weight. Not totally sure. I haven't tried this out with a deep carry clip. So while we're on this side, screws just thread directly into the frame there. So if that's one thing that you're worried about, that's a thing on this knife. I personally don't think it's a big deal. I think you'll screw up the screws before you ever get a chance to de-thread the frame. So other than that, you get good relief here on the lock bar. Really comfortable to disengage the lock. Not a whole lot of resistance considering they mill the relief out for the lock bar pretty thin. So it doesn't require a huge amount of force to disengage the lock bar. Lanyard hole has a kind of a stepped little design there. So, and then again, pocket clip is reversible, left or right hand, tip up only, but it's a frame lock, so it's really more of a right-handed knife. On the other side of the show pivot, you get the hexagon other side pivot, which I always like, just because you don't have to fiddle around with two Torx bits to either take it apart or just to adjust the pivot simply. So it does not look symmetrical by any means, especially with this really big fancy pivot here, but it is super functional. So I like it. It would have looked a little bit better if maybe they even just wanted to keep the design of the pivot the same, just scale it down a little bit so it looks a little bit more symmetrical, but whatever. All right, so done talking about the handle here. We're going to go ahead and talk about action and fit and finish. All right, guys. So action, fit, and finish. Uh, as always, it's pretty well up to ZT standards. You get blade is centered. Blade flips out really well. Detent is medium, maybe on a little bit on the heavy side of medium, but it's not too hard. Like I said, you just got to get used to the finger placement on the flipper tab. It's just a little bit different than what you're used to. Other than that, fit and finish wise, I can't really think of anything else that comes to mind other than the pivot being a little bit more purple. The anodization on the pivot is either off, or if that's how they designed it to be, I don't know. It's just the pocket clip is straight blue. The back spacer is straight blue. So I don't know if they meant for it to be a little bit more purple towards the center of the pivot and then the normal blue around the outside. Maybe that's just due to wear. Not totally sure, but that's just one thing that I noticed that I could think of as far as fit and finish goes on this knife. Otherwise, everything else is great. Like I said, flips really nicely as long as you get used to the flipper tab. And then pretty smooth. So not totally fall shut. Not a lot of production knives are, but pretty darn close. So pretty nice. No blade play in either direction, side to side or up and down. Super solid lockup. Yeah, everything's all good on this front. Nothing amazing, but about par for the course what I would expect from ZT and a knife of this price range. So green light here. Let's go ahead and talk about my overall thoughts on the knife, closing statements, and then we'll call it good. All right, guys. Here are my overall thoughts on the knife. I do like the aesthetics. The way the knife is put together, it's put together very well. You're definitely getting your money's worth in that category. Not totally my style here as far as the handle, the blade. I'm not saying it looks bad because I know a lot of people really like it. Just not completely my style. Again, the knife is put together very well. It feels great in hand. It's just, aesthetically, it's typically not something I would go for, even though my guy Dmitry Sinkevich always does a killer job. Just this offering doesn't strike me like that. Other things worth noting, at least this is just me personally, for a knife of this size, the weight is pretty significant. And only other thing that I would say is the flipper tab is a little bit different than most knives, so you'll have to get used to it. And when I say that, I'm not saying it's so different, it's so great, but it's just a little bit different. So when I'm saying that, it's not a huge change, it's just a little bit different, which is why it seems like a weird thing. You'll get used to it after a few days, I'm sure, but just a little bit off, at least to me. So there it is. That's the ZT-0456. Final thoughts. You get your money's worth for sure. Style is not something I typically would go for, but speaking to the quality and everything else and the design elements, it is a good quality knife that you get your money's worth, and it's big and heavy. So there it is. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe if you're new or if you're coming back and trying to stay up to date with all my videos. Link to my Instagram is also in the description box below, so go ahead and hit that for cool everyday pics of knives and some behind the scenes shots. So go ahead and hit that down as well. And with all of that out of the way, we'll go ahead and catch you guys on the next one. Thank you.